Jaywalking.
Happy October 21st.
Yep.
Weather is A+. This is the ideal time in Las Vegas. And I was just walking and I said to Dave, no noise today. And then this guy pulls up in a
You noticed that as soon as you said that, the truck pulled in. I think you made it.
We made that corner. I said, "Damn, he's here."
Yeah.
So today's a Monday. You know what means Monday. So I had a hair appointment this morning.
Yep.
And I got scheduled on the wrong time, I guess. I don't know whose fault it was, but I showed up at 8 o'clock. It wasn't until 9.
Ah.
So I came home and turned around and went back. Now we're doing this jaywalking. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about today, which has been a kind of a topic since this last Mr. Olympia, is comparing the past to present physiques. And this is something I dealt with my whole career. And it even dealt with, on my part, you know, people talked about 2001 Olympia and compared it to 2009 when I came back after losing to Dexter. You know, what's the better physique? And you talk about who you're standing next to, and you know, remember, shows are only won and lost with the competition on hand.
Right.
And I know there was something said, you know, Dorian made a statement on, you know, Brandon Curry, who won this year, the Mr. Olympia, and how you would stand next to his lineup back in, you know, his era.
Yeah. And
he mentioned that he'd have a hard time winning and being in the top placings. And where, as much as, you know, I look at that and people will say, he's right or he's wrong, it's a whole different era. And I know Jim Mannion actually touched on this a little bit in your video.
Yep.
And he said something, you know, we talk about Arnold, we talk about Sergio Oliva, we talk about you know, Dorian and Lee Haney, like eras of that. It seems like people, when they talk about Mr. Olympias, they always talk about the multi-winner ones, the ones that won the most, right? I mean, you talk about Frank Zane in the early days, but it seems like the talk is Arnold, Dorian Yates, Lee Haney, and Ronnie.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes myself, because there was a run there I had, you know, for obviously 4 wins, but I lost in the middle. But they don't really talk about like the
2-3 timers.
Yeah, like I guess Sergio won 3 times. Frank Zane was 3-time winner. But they don't talk about like Dexter or Samir Benoud, or I guess Franco Colombo was considered Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, 2 times.
You know, Larry Scott, those guys. So Chris Dickerson, right?
Yeah,
he won.
Yeah.
Won, but you know, it's 13 guys, or 14 now.
14.
Or they're 15.
15 with Brandon.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lose count.
I know.
Yeah. I don't even know my history. I thought Sean Ray was always the best historian, to be honest.
He knows a lot, yeah.
I think Lonnie Tieper knows a lot too. Not to credit our journalist people, but I always thought Sean was always good to do the critiquing because he followed it well. But to go back to what I was talking about, you know, I don't believe you can compare any modern bodybuilding to the past and say, I wish it was like those days, and how people would place. I mean, you can compare the physiques, but if you remember, Dave, you know, Nasser Al-Sambadi back in the day was unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was the first guy that was legit like 280 at not an outstanding height to be as good as he was. So that's just crazy to me. My neighbor. And I remember training with him and seeing him, and I remember Chris Aceto raving about how good he was. And then when he stood next to Dorian, he kind of dwarfed Dorian in a lot of poses.
Yeah.
But then, you know, Dorian turned around and beat the hell out of him. And I can tell one scenario when I went to the 95 Olympia. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. And I remember thinking, in the pictures I saw in the books, Like I remember Dillette looked so impressive, and Wheeler, and all these guys, and I'm like, how does Dorian Yates win? Because I don't think he has, besides his back and his calves, I thought like, okay, his arms are subpar, his legs were okay.
Yeah.
But these other guys were very dominant compared to him. And even Wheeler, who was a lot lighter, to me had way better shape.
Yeah.
Like when I showed up there and I watched all the guys come out and then Dorian came out, I was like, holy shit, now I know why he wins.
Yeah.
That's how impressive he was. Like, it didn't matter what the magazine showed.
Yeah.
Because you can compare a picture of people, but when you actually see it live on stage and you saw the overall width and the mass, and you know, those body parts didn't look so small standing next to these guys.
Yeah.
So it was crazy.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was listening to Chris Aceto, which is of course, you know, your prep coach all these years, and he said Dorian's legs, and I remember what you said about his legs being not that great. He says on picture his legs do not come through.
Yeah.
In person, it was nuts.
Yeah.
He says in person you saw his leg, you're like, holy shit, but for some reason on picture it never translated.
Yeah, so
yeah.
You know, I was impressed. I mean, and it just goes to show when you talk about comparisons, I hate that people make comparisons, especially like, I would never take anything away from Brandon. I mean, he deservingly won based on the lineup he was against. Now, you can compare him to Phil and you can compare to Sean Roden. Do I think that if those guys were in the show, Brandon would have won? I don't know. I think Sean would have won. I think Phil, if he entered, he would have beat everybody.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, but you know, right now you have to respect the champ. You know, who showed up and who performed is who matters.
Right.
So I'm excited for what the future brings, but you know, we need to stop kind of the comparisons. And you know, when people do these YouTube stories and they try to say, you know, Ronnie versus Phil.
Yeah.
And they have these pictures and they put them next to each other. You can't do that shit.
It means nothing. Yeah.
It means nothing, and that's coming from someone who, you know, people compare certain guys to me, and they talk about, oh, he's the next Jay Cutler or this and that. Like, there's only one of us, right?
Right.
I still think, you know, I'm going to do a video on this, you know, the greatest bodybuilder. You know, there's a certain physique, and then there's certain bodybuilders, so
yeah, that's
a whole nother topic, but I think ideally, you know, we look at, you know, 90s, 2000s, and then now beyond 2010. What is my era that I favor the most? I think I favor when I fell in love with bodybuilding, and that was early 90s.
Yeah.
I looked at Lee Haney's, I looked at Dorian's. Do I think that was like the golden era? For sure.
Yeah.
Because when you're on top and you're living it, and I'd love to blow my own horn and say, man, our era was the greatest, right? Me and Ronnie.
Yeah.
Nah. When I first started was, and you can agree because you came in around the same time.
Yeah. When
like,
Dillett and Cormier and Sean,
like, man,
Livroni.
I remember seeing these guys in the lineup, and I remember thinking, you know, guys that were placed 4th or 5th turn around week to week and they won.
That's right.
You know, even someone like Milos, who's been on our channel.
Yeah.
Like, I remember thinking, oh, he was skinny. Then I watched him transform. I remember one comment. Someone said he's like an ironing board with abs. I don't know what bodybuilder said that. And he had great midsection, but Milos wasn't big. He had the limbs that weren't so big. And then Milos got bigger. Then he, of course, ruined his arms with the synthol.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy how it's changed, and the perception of everything is so different. But we talk about maybe our favorite eras. I think it's, you know, I can sit there and say my favorite era was the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to say, you know, title this video, why the early 90s was the greatest time in bodybuilding.
I like that.
And this is my reason why. I think it's perception. I think it's, you know, I was more of a fan of bodybuilding then.
Yeah.
Because I quit bodybuilding. I retired because it wasn't fun for me anymore, and you know that, you lived with me.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't something I woke up every day and thought, I can't wait to do this. Now I wake up every day and I like get excited to work out, excited about the lifestyle, but the competitive drive in me just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And I think you realize that once you're not dominating and you're working harder to, you know, move through obstacles in order to achieve your best, right? So I think that's what makes a decision. And people that are fans or people that, you know, follow the sport, it's hard for them to comprehend that because they're not living in it.
Right.
And I think every athlete, once they figure out, you know, and they sit down and evaluate their career, they understand why they did that. So, you know, if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys do now. Make sure you comment below on this video if you agree or disagree with me. But, you know, let's try to keep the comparisons, you know, the eras now against the eras, keep it away from what's back then, because I think it's just respectful to those guys and respectful to the new age guys.
There you go.
All right, so keep following along, guys.
All right.